right, part two of The World This Week with four Paris-based correspondents, Erin Zaleski, Emre Demir, Matthew Dalton, and Anne Bagameri. Let's go to Turkey. Several things happening in Turkey this week. I mean, a shake-up at the very, very top. But first, let's go to this news that's just coming into us with a Turkish journalist. There's this high-profile trial, Emre, that has been going on in Turkey, and everything started a while ago when a journalist and his editor revealed footage of what appeared to be the Turkish intelligence agency sending weapons across to Syria. This at a point in time, at a point in the conflict, they weren't officially doing that, and Turkey wasn't officially involved in the conflict. Now, those two journalists had been accused of espionage and making state secrets public, and we're just hearing now that they have been sentenced. First of all, I mean, I have to ask you your reaction as a Turkish journalist.
Well, Can Dundar, he's a very well-known journalist in Turkey, very respected.
And by the way, sorry, I didn't finish that sentence. They've been sentenced to over 5 years in prison. That's the news that's coming in now. 5 years in prison.
And he
for doing
a
their
shot
job.
man today shot at Can Dundar 2 hours ago without any blessure. But Can Dundar, he became a symbol because Erdogan is very furious against him. He personally attacked numerous times against Can Dundar. And there are today over 2,000 journalists who lost their jobs. Over hundreds of journalists who have been judged because of insulting to president.
Yeah, there has been a witch hunt against Turkish journalists. And this idea that you can insult the president, that's in Turkish law? Is it even in the constitution?
No, it's a Turkish law. Nobody used it before Erdogan. Now there are over 600 journalists who are being judged because of this, this law. But Can Dundar embodies all of these journalists. He became a symbol of a fight, And today he's been attacked.
He was shot just
he
before.
Was shot.
Well, no,
he's
they
okay.
missed, but
they missed. He's okay. And this decision, I think, means a victory for Erdogan because it was a personal affair also for Erdogan. Mm-hmm. Constitutional Court, just remember the Constitutional Court, Turkish Constitutional Court, gave a decision in favor of Can Dundar. They said that it was a journalistic work. He's not an espion. He should be liberated. Mm-hmm. So Erdogan said that I don't recognize this decision. He must be in prison. So he will probably go to prison, and it's just a very frightening news for Turkish journalists. I feel when I talk with my friends in Turkey, the journalists, I feel that in Europe we don't understand really the gravity of the situation in Turkey. Mm-hmm. People are afraid for their lives. And a lot of them wants to go out of Turkey, and there is no way today. There are some fighters in Turkey like Can Dundar and others, but there's no way to do journalism in Turkey right now. So it's a kind of sad day for Turkish journalists and the freedom of expression in Turkey.
And we're looking at live pictures, by the way, which I presume are coming from just outside the Turkish courthouse in Istanbul. And also, I think interesting for our viewers and speaks to what you were just saying about the fear in Turkey, your own situation as a journalist. You work for the French edition of what used to be an opposition newspaper called Zaman, but in fact the Turkish headquarters were taken over essentially by the government just a few, 2 months ago, and that has now become a government, from an opposition newspaper, it has become a government-run newspaper, except for your branch of it, which is...
To put it simple, it was one of the largest newspapers in Turkey. In 2 months, they fired over 600 journalists, and they will shut down the newspaper in 2 weeks. So that's the situation. And over 50 of my colleagues are being judged right now.
And I think it's safe to say that there are a lot of people in Europe and within the journalism community who are looking at developments in Turkish politics because it just seems to be getting worse and worse. And again, another thing that was coming out of Turkey this week is the shake-up at the very top. Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu stepping down, not because he wanted to, essentially because his differences with Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president, were irreconcilable. And, they had reached a stage where he couldn't stay in power anymore. He says it wasn't his own decision, but it was a decision made out of necessity. Erin, is that something that you're looking at?
The interesting thing about this story is when Erdogan came to power in 2003, a lot of people in the West saw him as a reformer, as someone who would bring or advance democracy in Turkey.
That has changed.
And he's becoming increasingly authoritarian, and I think this is the latest move, a latest power grab on his end. And I guess my question for Emery would be, when did this shift? When did it shift from this open-minded guy? I remember there was talk about Turkey joining the EU, and it seemed like there was going to be a shift in a more liberal direction. When did things change?
Well, in 2002, he won a major landslide victory, and the Arab Spring came, and the Syria conflict in Syria started, and he became growingly authoritarian. Today, we cannot talk about an increasingly authoritarian regime. It has become an autocratic regime in Turkey. So the ask of the Prime Minister Davutoğlu is, constitutional speaking, it's a coup d'état. It's not possible.
That's what the opposition has called it. Absolutely.
Yeah, according to Turkish constitution, a president cannot take over a prime minister. It's the prime minister who also powers according to constitution.
Well,
so it means a change in the constitution too. So we're having a presidential system, and he has the absolute power. Erdogan has the absolute power over the state. To compare, even the sultans in Ottoman Empire didn't have this kind of power. So it's kind of worrying we will see it will be more and more difficult for the opposition or the journalists to survive in Turkey.
Let's shift to elections now in the UK. We've got a lot of ground to cover this evening. Regional, local elections in Britain. Two main things to watch. One is how the Labour Party fares under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn. We've already got some of the results in the Scottish Regional Parliament. Labour losing some ground, in fact, to the Conservatives, now third in the Scottish Regional Parliament. And of course, all eyes are on the London race and on this man, Sadiq Khan. Labour fielded a charismatic Muslim candidate from a working-class district. The Tories, on the other hand, ran Eton-educated Zach Goldsmith. So it's the son of a Pakistani bus driver versus the son of a billionaire. I mean, really, for journalists, the story writes itself. It's a gift to the media. Anne.
I'm recalling there was a Saturday Night Live parody of debate between Michael Dukakis and George Bush Sr. George Bush Sr. was pretty famously inarticulate speaking. He didn't really speak in complete sentences. He mumbled over his words. Dukakis spoke in complete paragraphs and was very articulate. And at one point, the Dukakis character on this satirical show, Saturday Night Live, said, "I can't believe I'm losing this guy." and when you look at the resumes and you look at the backgrounds of the two candidates for mayor of London, I would like to correct you on one point. I don't believe Zach Goldsmith ever graduated from Eton. I believe he was kicked out. I'm not sure he ever finished.
So Eton educated up to
a certain point. Yeah. If you just look at, Sadiq Khan, human rights lawyer, from the ground up, a wonderful story of a working class kid who made good, married to another lawyer, family raised in, convinced, absolutely committed to the life of London, versus Zach Goldsmith. It's pretty, you're right, it does write itself. And it also is not terribly surprising that with 80% of the votes counted, at least the last time I looked, that Khan was leading. You do have to kind of wonder, I'm not sure this is a referendum on Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. I think this was a very strong candidate, and I think London voters have recognized that.
No, I think for the rest of the country, analysts are going to look at how the Labour Party is faring under Jeremy Corbyn. London is really a race unto itself. And one of the things that was different about this London race is how dirty the campaigning got. I mean, identity politics played such a prevalent role here with Conservatives time and time again banging on about the fact that Sadiq Khan was a Muslim. This is what Sadiq Khan had to tweet, in fact, which is to some extent amusing. Okay, we don't have the tweet. Anyway, he tweeted back to Zach Goldsmith, who kept saying, all right, he's a Muslim, and associating him with all manners of extremists and Islamist fundamentalists. And at some point, Sadiq Khan says, look, you can stop pointing at me and telling everyone I'm a Muslim. I write it on my own leaflets. And he shows the picture. Isn't the Conservative Party shooting itself in the foot with this kind of campaigning?
Well, I think they see an opportunity. There's a lot of, in the public, generally speaking, after the attacks in France, and there's been a lot of rumors about attacks that were being planned in the UK. I think the terrorism fears have been running high in the UK. And so this was kind of a fertile grounds for attack, or at least that's the way they perceived it, in terms of trying to link. They were even linking Mr. Khan to ISIS affiliated people in some of their political advertisements. So it didn't work in London, but it may work in other parts of the UK.
Perhaps we should look at David Cameron a couple of weeks ago in the House of Commons. The strategy of trying to link Sadiq Khan to Muslim extremists came right from the top of the Conservative Party with the British Prime Minister himself, and this is the reaction he got in the House of Commons.
If we are going to condemn not just violent extremism, but also the extremism that seeks to justify violence in any way, it is very important that we do not back these people and we do not appear on platforms with them. And I have to say, I am concerned about Labour's candidate as Mayor of London, who has appeared again and again and again.
So what you couldn't quite make out is that they weren't just heckling the Prime Minister. The MPs and the backbenchers were saying racist. They were calling him a racist because of this negative campaigning.
I think the story was he was trying to link Khan with this specific imam that they were saying was linked to ISIS, because they appeared on the same platform at one point. But then I think it actually came out that Goldsmith had also appeared with the same imam.
The imam actually revealed that he had campaigned for the Conservatives because he'd been asked to do so in I believe it was a previous election.
So yeah, that sort of came back to bite them, I think.
What bothers me is that Sadiq Khan is not only a Muslim, he's also an LGBT defender, rights defender.
He voted in favor of gay marriage, absolutely.
A feminist, and apparently a successful politician. So should every Muslim that remember every time that he's a Muslim, especially when you look at the media, you see this Muslim mayor, etc. It kind of bothers me, he's not only a Muslim.
Don't we boil him down to his identity, to his faith, and his identity as a Muslim?
Yes, yes. It's kind of sad, He had even a fatwa against him because he defended gay rights, LGBT rights. So it's not always black and white.
The sad truth is that's just a good way to get votes in many, many districts, is by pointing that finger.
But what? For him to campaign on his Muslim identity, or
no, for somebody to point and say he's Muslim, therefore he's extremist, therefore he supports ISIS. That's still a
Except
very,
it
very
didn't
good.
work. Except it's
It didn't
backfiring.
work this time. It didn't work this time. That's true, which is interesting to see.
But it might not have, London is an island within the UK, and London, I think this line of attack probably would have been more effective in other electoral districts.
I got to interrupt you. We're just getting the news that Labour candidate Sadiq Khan has won the election. He is now mayor of London. So as far as the news headlines are going to be for the next 24 hours, and I'm sorry, Emre, it's going to be that a Muslim is now mayor for the first time, mayor of a major Western city. But you're absolutely right in the point that you raise. What does that tell us about how much or how little Muslims are actually integrated in our societies?
Well, I totally get it. There are not a lot of Muslim origin politicians who are successful in Europe. Or there is certainly a question about the immigration of Muslim population in Europe, but it's not the best way to help these people out. And we have to understand that Muslims are not homogeneous. They are really diverse. Every culture, every people, and also it must be the first point to get that there is no actually Muslim is not a sole identity for every Muslim.
The European Central Bank will stop printing 500 euro notes. Why? Well, because it's worried that the banknotes actually facilitate illegal activities. It makes carrying large amounts of money discreetly just a little too easy for their liking. In fact, in French police circles at any rate, the 500 euro note is actually known as the Bin Laden. Now, Germans and Austrians are up in arms because they're fond of cash, and it's not unheard of for them to buy their cars, including a Mercedes or BMW, in cash. But apart from that, the central bankers are happy, and there is also something of a security concern here. I'm told that I understand the Americans have been pushing Europe to get rid of the 500 euro banknote because they thought this was something that could facilitate terrorism. So who's going to hand in their 500 euro banknotes here?
I've already handed in all of mine. They go to the landlord and they go to the tax authority, and it's kind of funny to see the rhetoric around this. It's almost as though the Germans and the Austrians have borrowed something from the American political system by saying this infringes on our free rights to hold 500 euro notes and pay for our cars with them. It's not exactly a free expression issue, and it's not exactly a right to bear arms kind of issue, but that's the rhetoric that they're using. And there's not even any real evidence that not printing the notes even saves the ECB money, which was one idea that had been floated. So you do kind of have to wonder what it's all about.
Well, the reason that they're giving is this security reason.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the divergence in Europe is interesting. You've got countries like Scandinavian countries like Sweden, where they basically don't even use cash anymore. So there's some banks, like, they won't accept your cash. Everything is electronic. If you don't have a credit card to pay with something, you can't pay for anything. And countries like Germany and Austria, where, the cash is king and they insist on keeping their savings, under their mattress, I guess.
Erin?
Apparently, the main argument, like you were saying, is that terrorists and drug cartels are, doing everything in cash. Apparently, the Charlie Hebdo attackers facilitated everything with cash. But the question is, will getting rid of the 500 euro note change this? I mean, they could just use 200 notes or 100 notes. So I can see the intention, but I don't know that at the end of the day it will have any tangible results.
And one of the points that was made was, in fact, that the drug cartels, most of the drug is pushed in the U.S., money is laundered there, and they use dollars, and the highest dollar banknote is a $100 banknote, and that doesn't stop them from doing the illegal business.
Well, at least the euro is establishing itself, in
Taking a stand.
Whether it be, in the world of organized crime or high finance, it's
Another story that was essentially written for the media, Leicester City winning the English Premier League. The odds at the beginning of the season were 5,000 to 1. Well, they're finishing the season ahead of all the big names in British football: Manchester, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, etc. If you had asked even the most diehard Leicester fan at the beginning of the season if his team had any chance of winning the whole thing, he would have told you, you're crazy. Well, in fact, this is how the fans reacted when their team clinched the title. Emre Demir, you like football?
Yeah.
Leicester City, did you see it happening?
Well, yes.
Come on.
Well, listen, my story. There's this video game. Maybe you know. There's this video game called Football Manager or Championship Manager, where you play, where you pick some teams and try to be a champion.
Popular with football fanatics.
Of course, and I was an addict to this game, and I used to choose Leicester City because it was such a terrible team, and it was more challenging for me to succeed. So what we saw that
it was the hard
Football
path
Manager
to
is
success.
possible in real life. So it was kind of interesting, and since months I followed Leicester City.
You see, Anne, you should play more video games.
I should. But what I really loved about this story, and I'm not a big football fan, but there were so many wonderful moments in it. And I think that this may be something that we can circle back on, and we were talking about charismatic leadership earlier. Claudio Ranieri, the coach of the team, actually had a terrific idea back in October. He offered the team pizza if they would hold their opponents scoreless. Now, this happened back in October. This is 6 months ago.
And that was the key to getting the players motivated?
Well, according to Sam Borden of the Times, that is one of the moments that was really key. And then after that, of course, he kept buying pizza. Listen, everything else has been tried.
You provide pizza to athletes, and they win in a pro sports environment.
Well, you know what?
Secret to success with Anne Bagamary.
Any other theories? Any other theories on ways to get people to reach across the aisle and reform labor or work together in the U.S. Congress? I mean, has anybody tried pizza?
Matthew, I know you're not a big football fan, so I figured, I scratched my head and I said, how am I going to get Matthew interested in this? There are a couple of fun facts I worked out that I was told about when I was researching this story. Their best player on the Leicester side is Jamie Vardy. He was a welder not so long ago, playing for the local team, for his local team, and now he's going to play for England at the Euro. So that just gives you a sense of how far he's come. There's even talk of a Hollywood movie about his rise to the top of the sport. Gary Lineker, one of the best ever football players for England, who now represents the main football show and presents that show, will have to present the season opener in his underwear after going out on a limb that Leicester City had no chance of winning the title. And if none of that moves you, here's a list of things that, according to bookmakers, were more likely to happen than Leicester winning the Premier League. Let's take a look. Discovering the Loch Ness Monster is actually real. That was more likely, according to the bookmakers. Triplets for Kate and William. All right, okay. Finding Elvis alive. More likely than Leicester winning the Premier League. Kim Kardashian for U.S. president.
And there's also Bono becomes Pope. The Pope is much more probable than Leicester.
And Hugh Hefner revealing that he's a virgin.
So now are you going to write about it, Matthew?
Well, we've been writing about it, but I think it'll make a great Hollywood movie. I think Americans will really like to see it. The only problem is that they have to figure out how to pronounce Leicester. So, because everyone looking at the name every American will say Leicester. So I think maybe
Leicester.
they just Leicester. Right? See it again. So I think maybe they should actually just rename or respell it, spell it like the name Leicester, like Lester, and then it will just really stick in every American's head.
I humbly admit that pronunciation mistake may have been made on occasion over the last few days, even on Paul's Handcap. All right, thank you very much to all our guests for joining us for The World This Week. Give me just a second. We're going to join Emma James in Media Watch just now. Okay, somebody who knows how to say Leicester City, British through and through. Emma James joins us now. You're taking a look at what's got people talking online, and we start with a not very happy anniversary for the French President, François Hollande.
No, indeed. You may remember that exactly 4 years ago, May the 6th, 2012, François Hollande won the presidential election. And the hashtag today, #Hollande, is trending very, very heavily, has been for hours here in France, to mark that occasion. But it might be something that the president wants to give a bit of a miss to, because a lot of it isn't very positive. This one is typical, really. After 4 years, le changement c'est quand? The change is when. Now, you may remember that he had this rather odd campaign slogan, the change is now, which came with a strange arm movement that no one quite understood.
No, the arm movement was fantastic. It got him elected.
Maybe it did. But anyway, people really do seem to want him out now. And it's no great surprise. He's the most unpopular French president since they started taking polls on this kind of thing. But what we're seing online...
He's going to start to have to really wiggle his arms. Work up some...
Yes. He may have to start voguing, who knows. But as this Twitter user points out, the verdict of the internet is cruel. The best troll of François Hollande is François Hollande. And the reason that they're saying that is that people are dredging up, whether it's clips of speeches or whether it's his own Twitter account, they're trawling through the archives for things that he's said that he hasn't managed to achieve, or things that maybe are slightly unfortunate. A lot of them coming from 2012, in the run-up to that election, where he was criticising Nicolas Sarkozy, the then French president. And people are pointing out just how unfortunate it is, really. They're using his own words against him. This one, I don't think that a president at the end of his term can find solutions for the problems he's created over 5 years. That was the words of François Hollande in 2012. This one, the good ideas must happen at the start of the mandate, not at the end. And another example of this one, at the end of the mandate, unpopularity doesn't reveal courage. Unpopularity reveals the defiance of the French against those who are leading them. So all very, very unfortunate stuff. There are a few dissenting voices out there, not too many of them, though. This one, Hollande, looking forward to 2017 when you'll be re-elected, and the hashtag ça va mieux, the words of the French president, it's getting better.
Oh, one of the 13% or 15% who approves his policies. Now, we've already mentioned Donald Trump's attempt to win over Hispanic voters. I imagine the Twitter sphere is full of comments on this one.
Absolutely. It does seem
What are we looking
incredible,
at?
really. This is the original tweet from Donald Trump. Happy Cinco de Mayo, which in itself is a Mexican celebration. The best taco bowls are made in Trump Tower Grill. I love Hispanics. Now, it's not surprising that people have reacted to this. Remember, this is the guy who said Mexicans who come into the US are all rapists, they bring crime with them, and added the sort of slight rider that some of them might be good people.
Right. Well, he's clearly making amends. He's eating tacos.
Well, yes, but does that really do it? That's the question. Now, of course, he did pledge to build a wall to keep the Mexicans out of the United States, and this has to be the best tweet on this subject. A taco bowl is just a taco with a big, beautiful wall around it, echoing the words of Donald Trump on trying to keep those pesky Mexicans out of the United States. Lots and lots of people on Twitter about this. He built a wall around the sour cream. Who paid for it? Who? Of course, he said the Mexicans had
Would
to
have
pay
to
for
pay
their
for
own
the wall
wall.
themselves.
Absolutely.
Culinary politics.
So really, people can't quite believe that he's had the nerve to say this. Trump is terrible, but if he tweets a picture eating chicken and watermelon and says, I love blacks, he may earn my vote just for his comedic prowess alone.
Very, very quickly now, because we've got to this, a very British solution to a curious boating problem. Tell us more.
Yes, this is about the most British problem you can come up with, really. You would think if you have a £200 million research vessel and you ask the British public to come up with a name for it, they'd come up with something befitting something of that value. No, they came up with Boaty McBoatface. 124,000 people voted for that. However, democracy has been thrown aside in the United Kingdom. They have decided that it's going to be named after Sir David Attenborough, the gentleman you see here. He is a legend. He is a national treasure in the United Kingdom, having basically inspired generations of people to love animals, to love wildlife, to love nature, because he is the voice of so many documentaries. He actually turns 90 on Sunday. So a lot of people think that it is rather a fitting end to this saga. Even the New York Times is writing about this particular article and pointing out that some people are sulking a little bit, but not too much, because after all, that isn't really the British way. So apparently if you vote for anything and somebody doesn't like it, they can just change it, so what's the point? But this one, if you didn't like Boaty McBoatface in the first place, why give us the option? Although Sir David Attenborough is a fine choice, well deserved.
All right, no Boaty McBoatface, sadly. Would have made for a good news story. Emma James with Media Watch, thank you very much. Thanks to all our guests for joining us on The World this week. Do stay tuned, another edition of World News coming up right after this.